Grade 9, Pride and Prejudice, Amazing Analysis and Essay Plans, Episode 1, George Wickham. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been writing up some unique essay points, so if this is helpful to you, be sure to subscribe. So this is the video contents. So we're going to look at the 3 points, and then we're also going to look at an example 4-mark essay about George Wickham. So let's begin with the first point, which is that George Wickham is initially portrayed as charming and affable. Now you can see this mind map here. So, listing is used to describe the overwhelming attraction of George Wickham. Now, one way this is portrayed is through the focalizer character Elizabeth. She is naive, and her blurred judgment causes her to view George Wickham, and hence make the reader view George Wickham, as someone who is so charming and affable. Now, there's very hyperbolic and frantic language in Elizabeth's dialogue, and this shows that she just isn't thinking straight. You can see in the quote, "But Mr. Wickham is beyond all compassion, the most agreeable man I ever saw. Oh, that abominable Mr. Darcy." Now, within that dialogue, there's a lot of dashes and ellipses and exclamatives, and it's almost like she's pacing from sentence to sentence. She doesn't exactly have a clear narrative, and it highlights how she's abruptly changing her mind about things and not thinking clearly about their personalities. Now, you can also see she describes Wickham initially as agreeable and Darcy as abominable. Now, this acts as a foil to Darcy. So initially, Darcy is portrayed as pretentious and rude, and Wickham is portrayed as kind and, warming. And you see these two characters totally flip in the narrative, but you can see how, because these two adjectives, agreeable and abominable, are alliterative, you can really connect how they are presented as foils, which mean they act to contrast one another. Now you can see there's another quote which says, "Appearance greatly in his favour, all the best parts of beauty, fine countenance, good figure." Again, that's where we discuss the listing and how it describes the overwhelming attraction, and you can see there's this almost idyllic perfection at which Elizabeth describes him, which just simply is impossible. Okay, let's move on to point 2. So, however, after the enlightenment of Wickham's true intentions, he is portrayed as both ambitious and manipulative. So, you can say that Wickham is portrayed as a substanceless leech that latches on to any opportunity to economically exploit others. Now, he was exposed via the epistolary technique, which means through a letter, in which Darcy reveals the evil character of Wickham. He describes him as an unprincipled man who is greedy and vengeful. Now, there's also a cyclical nature that of both how Lydia and Georgiana both got, manipulated into an elopement. The youngest sister, just 16, eloped. And it could hence even be argued that Wickham did not even progress or stay static, he worsened over the time. And it juxtaposes how all of the other characters overcame their pride or overcame their prejudice, such as Elizabeth and Darcy. And finally, let's look at point 3, which is Austen's use of timing and her timing of the different revelations of Wickham's intent, and this adds to dramatic effect. So despite having a third-person omniscient narrator, Austen's purposeful choice of excluding the reader from Wickham's intentions then positions the reader in the same dumbfounded position as Elizabeth, of being naive and quite foolish, not realising the true intentions. Now, Austen's purpose of this is to highlight even to the reader how the reliance on first impressions, as well as prejudice, can blur a person's true demeanour. And we saw this happen to both Wickham and negatively to Darcy. Now let's look at the 4-mark GCSE essay about George Wickham. During the Regency era, social and economic climbers were epitomised by women who would desperately latch onto marriage to a man in possession of a good fortune. See, that's reference to the first line. Similarly to modern times, where women tend to be associated of the same caliber as gold diggers who marry for economic and social gain. So hopefully here you can see when talking about the reader in this introduction, I talked about both the modern and the contemporary reader. However, within Pride and Prejudice, Austen interests the reader through the manipulative tactics of Wickham, who automatically pleads a victim's case to any woman of sizable dowry and inheritance. Okay, let's look at the first paragraph. Through the almost hypnotised vocaliser perspective of Elizabeth, the reader learns about Wickham as a poor victim in every aspect, wrongfully positioned due to the detestable Darcy. Wickham, within the extract, places blame on Darcy, for even though Wickham must have employment, Darcy supposedly robbed this opportunity of Wickham. Through the usage of the modal verbs ought and must, Wickham emphasises on what should have occurred and how he was duped. Furthermore, Wickham abuses his knowledge of Elizabeth's primary distaste for Darcy to easily throw these hateful accusations across. So hopefully you can see here how in this essay we're slowly progressing through our first point about how we've talked about the hypnotizer point of Elizabeth and how she's susceptible to Wickham's manipulation. And you can see through words like through the usage of, furthermore, we're having this cumulative effect. And I've done this and it's got to be 4 marks in the exam, so I'm giving it as advice for you. Use words like furthermore because it suggests to the examiner you're moving from a point to another point and you're developing your ideas. Later on in Pride and Prejudice, through the epistolary technique, we learned the very oxymoron of Wickham's supposed assurance in the events that transpired. In fact, Wickham refused employment to squandering the money gifted by Darcy. Verbal irony is then instilled in this extract, as Wickham's perspective of Darcy, in truth, is more in line with his own deceitful life. Hence, it was vital that the reader initially met the character through the naive and prejudiced Elizabeth, as opposed to the omniscient narrator, in order to replicate to the reader the very shock of the incorrectness of the perception of goodness bestowed upon the truly manipulative and scheming Wickham when Darcy exposes his hateful intentions. Paragraph 2. However, hints can be found in this exchange which foreshadows the truly disingenuous intentions of Wickham. For instance, the visual disparity in lengths of dialogue between Elizabeth and Wickham, which implies the heavy imbalance, and how Wickham feeds into Elizabeth's unreeling manipulation and broadcasts his supposed innocence, which subverts the Regency expectations at the time, in which secrecy outside the immediate family was rampant in order to protect reputations and marriage prospects. So, what I'm saying there is that in a time where everyone was so quiet and hushed up about their realities and, income, finance, relationships, and things like that, Wickham is so open about it and he wants to broadcast his how innocent and how of a victim he is, which just subverts it and makes it even more suspicious. Thus perhaps this would have been more identifiable from the contemporary reader's perspective, although arguably with hindsight from reading that developing and how he developed, and that these niche details would grow outstandingly obvious to the reader. Austen also presents Wickham as a monetary leech who binds to the prospect of marriage in women. Hence, Austen uses Wickham as an effective device to highlight the flaws in those hunting of relationships with solely greed-bound intentions. So this was just a part of an essay, but I hope that you found it really helpful. I'm just giving my essays out as a free resource because I think there's not many resources on Pride and Prejudice. So if you genuinely do find it helpful, here's a little reminder to subscribe. And also, if you have any other video recommendations, feel free to put them in the comments below. And thank you for your lovely comments. Good luck with your exam and see you soon.